Hey guys, really quick, I wanted to take a second and talk about podcasting. Why? Because this medium has been the greatest thing to ever happen to me. A little over 5.5 years ago, I bought a $60 microphone and everything in my life has changed. I've gone on to build a successful business, live events, a lucrative speaking career, and I've been able to connect and become friends with some of the most influential thought leaders in the world, all because of podcasting. Now, you might not know this about me, but I've also helped multiple other people do the same thing. I usually work one-on-one with high-ticket clients to help them really build their brand. But so many people were asking me, Justin, I need to know the secret. So I've actually put together a masterclass. So if you head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, you can sign up for the masterclass today and learn exactly how I've been able to build this business, and you can too. This course is for wannabe podcasters and also podcasters who aren't getting the results that they want. Again, head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, grab your masterclass now, dive in, and take your life to the next level. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. So before we get to this episode, I wanted to just kind of say something really, really quick. So this week I sit down with Peter Montoya, and he is the author of a book called The Second Civil War. And in this episode, we talk about the great divide that is happening within our country, within the world itself, and in particular in America, and how they purposely divide us with their narratives in order to stay in power. But one thing I wanted to say before we get into this episode, there's great power in togetherness. Even if we don't agree with each other all the time, even if somebody else's views are different than yours, even if their skin color, their sexual preference, whatever it is different than yours, there's power in unity. If you look at the history of our world, it's always, if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. United we stand, divided we fall. And even far as back as scripture, love thy neighbor. It doesn't say love thy neighbor if they agree with you about your opinions. And so the important part of this conversation that I'm having with Peter is that we need to come together. In community, we need to come together as one to stand up for our freedoms, to stand up for what we feel is right. And it's really about togetherness. And that's really the point of this conversation that I get to have with Peter. Now, with that out of the way, let me tell you a little bit about Peter. You see, there are seasoned entrepreneurs, gifted speakers, and best-selling authors, but rarely do you find all 3 in one person. Peter Montoya is that rare exception. Author of the brand called You, skilled orator, and with over 4,000 keynotes under his belt, and creator of the game-changing tech startup Earth, a social media platform which will eliminate bots, trolls, and misinformation. Today, Peter is going to share with us insights from his newest best-selling book, The Second Civil War, a citizen's guide to healing our fractured nation. He'll share practical lessons, not only how to cope with relationships with those whose political views we find intolerable, but also how to rehabilitate those relationships, making them healthier than ever before. Now, like I said, remember, all we have is each other, and it's really about community. And so before we get to the episode, I want to remind you guys that I love my community. I love the Growth Now movement. That's why I put together Growth Now Summit Live, where you can get your tickets today. growthnowsummit.com. Go grab your tickets and join the community live and in person May 2022. Tickets are on sale now. There are less than 70 left, so make sure you grab them today. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Peter Montoya. Peter, welcome to the show, man.
Justin, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we got introduced by Dolph Barron, and people who have listened to my show, they know him. He's been on multiple times and just such an insightful guy. And when he introduces me to somebody, it's usually an immediate yes. But when I saw the book title, even just the title of your new book that came out, I'm like, hell yes, we need to have this conversation because, the world right now is in a very, very strange place, right? And like you said, we're in our second civil war right now, and we're going to get into all that stuff. But let's take a second really quick. Who's Peter? And how'd you get to where you are today?
I've had the strangest career. So I graduated with a degree in political science. And when you have a degree in political science, you only have three choices. You can go to law school, you can become a bartender, or you can go into sales. So I went into sales and I went to work for the biggest motivational speaker in the world. That was almost 30 years ago. Worked for him for a couple of years, then decided I knew enough. So I struck it out on my own, started an advertising agency, wrote a book called The Brand Called You, which was was the second book on personal branding back in 1998, wow, which was kind of the beginning of that wave of personal branding. Had an advertising agency. I then transformed it into a software company. I've owned every business you can possibly imagine. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm what they call a quick start. I've owned insurance agencies, finance companies, CrossFit gyms, coffee shops, technology companies. Some of them have failed. I'm sorry, some of them succeeded. More of them have failed, but the ones that succeeded did 20 times what I failed. Yeah. I've delivered 4,000 keynote presentations. I've written 4 books, and started 12 different businesses. So I think I'm kind of unusual in the world because most entrepreneurs are not good speakers or good content creators. And I think that I thread the needle that I'm both a good content creator, speaker, and also a pretty good entrepreneur.
No, I love that. And it's so funny. Like you said, that's not a normal path, but I feel like that's a path that so many people want to go down, but they don't have all the skills or the ability or they're not resourceful enough to be able to kind of go down those paths. So I love hearing, I'm like, yes, let me live this life. This sounds phenomenal. Actually, I'll fail all I want as long as I get a 20x return on all the wins. I think that's a huge thing right there. Now, that with all that being said, the topic that we're here to talk about today isn't necessarily that, right? Like it's so much greater than the wins and losses of life and business and everything in between, right? So I had mentioned earlier, you talk about we're in the second civil war. And I asked you this question before I hit record, and you're like, you should hit record. Obviously being such a successful entrepreneur and speaker and all the things, what made you go down this rabbit hole of figuring out why we're in the Second World War right now? And what does that even mean?
Yeah, it was because, I was in it. So maybe about 2 years ago, my father-in-law, who I love and respect greatly, he is an incredible human being. I respect him so much, was sending out, his basic once a week political email about the candidate he liked. And usually I would delete them. But this one day, 2 years ago, I hit reply, and I replied with the nastiest, snarkiest, most hurtful thing I could possibly say. And I remember in the moments before hitting the send button is, should I send this? And I thought, you know what? He deserves it. He is completely justified. What I said was true, and he deserves to get popped. And so I pushed the send button. About 24 hours later, I was going, something's not sitting right. I went back and reread the email, and I was like, oh my God, who sent this? Who was possessed enough to have said these nasty, horrible things to someone who they like and respect? So I called him up. I asked him to dinner. He was furious with me. My trust and credibility had dropped to 0 with him. Honestly, accurately so. I did a mea culpa. I apologized. I listened to him yell at me and said, you're right. And then I began this exploration to figure out, why did I do that? Why do I have friends and family who all have either damaged and or lost relationships over politics? Why is this happening?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's at its greatest point right now, right? Like it is constant divide. If you're not with me, you're against me. Whatever happened to don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics.
Yeah.
And those were and don't talk about money, right? The 3 things you're not supposed to talk about. What was the shift in the world, do you think, where people automatically started spouting like, my information is the greatest information, I'm right, you're wrong? Where did that even begin?
So here's the challenge for us as human beings is all leadership, all problem solving, all creativity starts with a common understanding of the facts. So, Justin, when you and your team have a business problem, either you get on a Zoom call or you get in a room and you go, okay, what's happening? And you hear from everybody to understand what's happening, and then you start solving the problem. But what the media has done is, I'm oversimplifying it, has cleaved itself into two different ecosystems. Each ecosystem has a different information set. And so we're all hearing about the problems in the world. We're all being told that the other side is to blame for the problem. We're all being told the other side is taking advantage of us. And that's the information that we're being pumped in. So everything is happening through a political lens anymore. Yeah. I mean, notice what is politics now. I mean, notice what's covered. The ice storm in Texas was a political story.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years ago, it was a news event. It was weather, and now it's been politicized. Everything is now politicized. And so we're being pumped full of this. We have friends and family who we think don't agree with us. And so when we come to have these conversations, we come with this full charge of there are people out there hurting the country and or taking advantage of me. And damn it, you better not be one of them. That's how we're walking into those conversations based on our media consumption and based on the frustration that we need to agree on reality in order to solve problems.
Yeah. You know, I love the fact that you said we're politicizing everything, right? Like an ice storm in Texas becomes a political thing. A worldwide pandemic has become a political thing.
Yeah. Forest fires, the Olympics. Simone deciding to jump out of the Olympics and not compete. That was a political. How did we politicize everything? And everything is because it's politicized is personal.
Yeah. And so what is your take on that? Why do you think that's happening right now within our media? Is it for ratings? Is it for dollars? Is it for what?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So first of all, let me define media. So when I say media, I'm not just talking about the 5 big cable news channels and ABC, NBC, and CBS. When I say media, I mean that term really broadly. So that includes cable TV, internet TV, podcasts, radio, newspapers, online articles. Media even includes the TV on an elevator. The TV on a gas pump. So media, books, any way that you consume content. Now, some of that content is really good. It's fact-driven, and what it helps us do is empathize more with what's happening in the world, and that's really good. And there's also a segment of a lot of that media, which basically has come to learn the best way to get our attention is through fear and outrage. So fear and outrage are incredibly addictive. So we get addicted to being scared and to being angry. And there are people going, Peter, well, you're not talking about me. You're talking about someone else. And I could be talking to you and you may not even realize it. Yeah. So there are people who go on a complete news blackout. They stop watching the news and they around 9:00 at night, they start twitching, kind of like Inspector Clouseau. What's going on? I didn't really watch my hate porn today. What's going on right now? They're kind of feeling a little anxious because they don't know, they're not informed anymore. And that's probably a good indication that you're addicted to this media. So what media realizes is the very best way to get our attention is either fear or outrage. They know that the more scared we are, the more likely we are to tune in and give them our attention. When they have our attention, they sell more advertising. When they sell more advertising, they make more money and their market capitalization goes up. And you're saying, Peter, are you telling me that the major news companies are that naked in their ambitions, that naked in that all they're doing is dividing us, teaching Americans to hate other Americans just so they can make money? Yes. And they know they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I watched, there was a hidden camera conversation with one of the high ups in CNN, and he stated, if it bleeds, it leads. That's why we don't show necessarily the facts or the positive side of what's happening in the world right now. And it's really kind of sickening to understand that that's happening. And there are so many people, including family members of mine, who are drawn in and sucked in and addicted to the news, and they refuse to listen to any other opinion or refuse any other perspective than what is the news telling them that it is. And so I just feel like, and me and my girlfriend talk about this often, I feel like it's reached a boiling point right now, especially in the last year and a half, 2 years. I've never seen it like this before in my life. Just the easiness to attack. And obviously on social media, it makes it easier because you have the screen in front of you to protect you and you're not going to get popped in the mouth, like you said earlier. But what do you think is driving it up even more? Because am I wrong by saying it's gotten worse, or is that just my perspective because I'm whatever? But like, what's driving it even more now beyond the media?
Well, it's not only that, it's not only the media, it's also politicians. So whenever you are watching consuming any kind of content, and that content is vilifying another American, whether it be an American person or a group. So they say, the Republicans or the Democrats or the socialists or this minority group, if they are capturing your attention by vilifying another American, you got to know that they are doing something deeply unpatriotic. So there is evil in the world, and there's even evil in this country. But I'm telling you right now, it's probably in the tens of thousands of people that are evil. It isn't a whole party. It's not a whole group of people. The only reason, if you believe that half the country is evil, you are a pawn on someone's chessboard made to believe that way. Reality is a construct, and your reality has been constructed by people who want you to vilify half of the Americans. That's all there is to it. Now, who are the people who are really evil? They are psychopaths who are murderous and want to kill and rape people. Those are the ones who are really evil and irredeemable. There probably is tens of thousands or maybe 100,000 in the country, maybe. And most likely they're locked up. The rest of Americans are all agreeing to the same social contract that you and I agreed to. What's the social contract? Go get an education. Be honest, do work for your living, do your best to take care of yourself and your family, be willing to sacrifice something for the benefit of your fellow Americans, do what's in the best interest of your country. 90% of Americans believe in this. So the narrative that there is this group of Americans who is trying to exploit you or take something away from you, that is a narrative that's been manufactured to make you believe that's half the country. It is not. It is a minority of the country.
That's so interesting to hear. And so why are they? But I think even the question that I have during this time, and in fairness, and I'll admit here, this is the first time I've ever gone down rabbit holes of conspiracies and all the things in between. But why do you think they're doing this? Is it power? Is it just to win? Is it money? Like what? All the things you're just shaking your head. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so each party has its own interest. So the political parties right now, what do they want? They want voters. They want more members assigned to each one of their parties who say, I am a card-carrying Republican, Democrat, Socialist, Libertarian, whatever it is. I'm going to vote with you no matter what anybody else says, and I'm going to donate. And so the noise volume from all of them is getting louder and louder. So each one has to yell louder about how the other side is taking advantage of you in order to get your attention and also get mind and wallet share. So here's a really good time to talk about the battlefield. So the first Civil War, where was the battlefield? Well, the battlefield was very clear. It was Gettysburg, and it was all the places to the South where they actually fought battles. What was the dividing line? The dividing line was incredibly clear. The dividing line was federal versus state rights and slavery. We knew exactly what the issue was. All right. So 2 questions. What's the battle over today? Why are we at each other's throats? In the most simplest of ways is we're arguing about who has the right version of reality. That's a very, very simplified version. My version of reality is right and yours is wrong. You're an idiot. I'm putting my quotation mark. You're an idiot for believing your version of reality. I don't think that's true, by the way. That's not true, but that's what we think. And then the question is where is the battlefield? Where is it being fought? Because it's not out. Sometimes it is in the streets. There is some hot battle, but that's not really where it's being fought. Where is this war being fought? The battle is being fought in your mind. So the media personalities, the shock jocks, the fear mongers, the political party, they want to own your mind. And so what they're going to do is use every technique possible to make you feel that they are watching out for you, that they are your savior, your protector, your hero. And the other side is trying to take something away from you. And when you buy that narrative, they own you. And now you are watching their show or listening to their podcast or paying the subscriptions fees or buying their advertising on their show. The battle is being fought in your mind. So if you want to stop that, it's fairly simple. You just stop playing the game. You exit the battlefield, which any American can do at any moment they choose.
Yeah. And, obviously leading up to the story you told about your father-in-law, you were somebody at one point, you were on the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
You attacked him via email because he was sharing his opinions, and maybe he did it in an aggressive manner. Who knows? But so he didn't. But like, I've seen my friends, who I disagree with, but we're still friends, mind you, who I disagree with, and they get very upset. And I just go, okay, like there's nothing for me to get upset about. Like it doesn't, it's not going to affect me in any way, shape, or form. But what was other than sitting down with your father-in-law and having that discussion, what was your big shift in understanding, okay, this is how I need to handle this going forward, and here's why?
And so I began a lot of research. So I read every book about politics, and they weren't partisan politics, why the Republicans are right or wrong, or why the Democrats are right or wrong. I read books about political psychology, and where I got most of it was a field of study called evolutionary psychology. If you want to have your mind blown, spend some time reading books about evolutionary psychology, about how our minds developed. And what I thought is that, well, I've transcended my lizard brain. Sure, I know that I'm related to apes, but I don't behave that way. Look at me, and I don't have fur all over me. I'm civilized. I went to college. I've read 500 books in the last 20 years. I've listened to thousands of hours of podcasts. I have transcended that Neanderthal that's inside my brain. No, I haven't. I'm every bit as tribal, or I was every bit as tribal as anybody else. And so when you pull it all away, we are still incredibly tribalistic. So sorry, that's not true. I'm going to oversimplify and generalize. So most conversations about politics are not about politics. So it sounds like, let's talk about policy. Do you believe in, guns, or do you believe in a higher minimum wage, or do you believe in climate change? And you think you're having a conversation about policy. Virtually no conversations about politics or about policy. The conversation is very, very simple. Are you on my team or not? So we all have these things called tribal badges. A tribal badge can be physical. So sometimes you can look at somebody and see that they have a piece of purple hair. They go, okay, I know what tribe they're in. Maybe they got a little blue stripe on a pin somewhere. You go, okay, I know what tribe you're in. Oh, you got a flag back to the back of your truck? Oh, okay. Sometimes they're physical like that. Or maybe it's a tattoo, and it says it's never forget, or always remember, or country before party. And you see these little badges, and we instantly go, okay, I know what tribe you're in. But more and more often for most of us, it's verbal. And we go out and we go, hey, did you hear about X? Did you hear about what happened in Afghanistan? And both of the information silos have created talking points. And the talking points are filtered down. And if your friend repeats the same talking point, which you have heard, you go, okay, this person's on my team. They're safe. However, if they echo a different talking point, which is not part of your narrative, your little tribal brain goes, uh-oh, this person's an enemy. And so even though we're civilized, and even though we don't pull out spears and stab each other, our minds are still reacting the same. Our midbrains are completely inflamed, and we are in fight or flight mode, wondering how this friend of ours, who we thought they were our friend, how we thought they had a good sense of morality, is completely out of their mind. So that's why we don't have conversations about politics, because it isn't about politics. It's nothing. It is the same conversation that you may have had when you were in third grade, Justin, when you argued who was the best Marvel superhero. It is exactly the same as that. It is I think my dad can beat up your dad conversation. We just do it with a slightly more sophisticated slant.
And it's so interesting. And this is something that the great divide, right? Like our country's becoming more and more divided. Republican, Democrat, mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine. Who started this storm? Who did this? Global warming, not global warming. Like, it's unbelievable how the narrative continues to divide. So I want to get to the important part of this conversation is, how do we begin to heal? How do we begin to come together as one, how this country is supposed to be? You mentioned on your website, think about the times our country came together. Often I think about after 9/11, when we were attacked, and I was a senior in high school when this happened. But I remember wholeheartely. I also worked at Wawa, which is a convenience store in my area at the time. And I remember people buying coffee for the next 5 people in line. It was about that togetherness. How do we begin the process? It's not going to happen overnight. The Civil War ended. There was still no peace, right? But how do we begin that healing process?
It's a really, really good question. And by the way, my book is political, and that it's called The Second Civil War: How to Heal Our Fractured Nation. But it really is very, very practical. So it explains kind of why we are this way. But more importantly, I give lots of practical steps on how to heal both yourself and this country. So the first one is to upgrade your tribe. And so what most of us have done is we have chosen a political tribe as our primary tribe rather than America. So 20 years ago, it wasn't Republican against Democrat for the purpose of trying to annihilate the other side. 20 years ago, it was Republican and Democrat versus our collective problems. So if there is some part of your brain where you're going, okay, the only way for us to move forward as a country is the elimination of the other political party, you are misguided. That is not the way forward. We are not going to leave any part of this country behind. Mm-hmm. So you have to basically go, you know what? My primary allegiance is to country first. So I am an American, and every other American is an American, and they are included in my tribe. Making that distinction of country over party is a huge shift. And they can go farther. Everyone hates this recommendation, Justin. No one agrees with me on this one, but you should go independent. You should drop your political affiliation. You should become independent for the very reason is it helps you see the world a little more objectively. It removes a little bit of bias. So the whole idea is to interrogate ideas based on their merits, not just because your party told you to vote that way or think that way.
Yeah, no, and I don't hate that recommendation, by the way. I identify as an independent because it's more about the greater good, not about the party. And I've felt that for a long time. I mean, I won't say who, but like the last couple of presidential elections, I don't know, I will say who. I didn't vote for any of the main people. And so I was like, I refuse to put my check mark next to that name because I don't see the greater good coming from them. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's the first time I've ever openly talked about politics on my show. So you got that from me. But it's because I really am neutral. Like I don't get angry about it because it is what it is, right? Like I support America. I want them to get better. Do I see it getting better right now? No. But at the same time, like this is where we're at. So what can we do to continue? So that's a great first step to continue or to begin the process of healing, right? To understand America first, not party first. Yeah. Because that's just like a divide between countries or teams or whatever. Like this isn't a football game. This is life. Right. And so what else can individuals do to begin that healing process? Because look, there is this pent up anger that so many people are carrying around that's going to take some time. All
right. So let me give you at least two more. And if you want more, we'll give more. The next one is to realize that a hot civil war is a non-starter. So we are currently in a cold civil war, which is also another way of saying it's a social civil war. It's friend against friend, colleague against colleague, parent against child. And we're seeing the social fabric being frayed, where we can't connect and cooperate with the people who we love most because of politics. So that's why it's called the Second Civil War, is because we actually are in a social civil war. Now, some people desire a hot war. They want to actually see violence and fighting in the streets. And let me share with you the following. The first Civil War, 620,000 troops died. Another 100,000 civilians died. Upwards of 750,000 people died, which was 2.3% of the population back then. If we extrapolated that to today, that'd be 7.25 million people today. Now, also what I'll tell you is this, is 90% of civil wars end with genocide. Our first civil war didn't, but most civil wars end with wholesale slaughter of other people. So if you're somehow thinking that violence is the solution to this problem, I'm here to share with you, logically, that does not play out. We will not rebuild, regain, and come back to where we are right now. You are basically taking all of your interests, whatever you want for the outcome, putting it into a blender. And you might be, even if you win, I assure you, the issues you went in with fighting over it's going to be a different set of problems on the way out. Violence is not a solution to this war we're in right now.
Now, somebody who studied this as much as you have, do you see it potentially going down that path?
Not really. I mean, we did see 32 deaths last year as a result of politics. It happened at riots, happened because of shootings and or bombings. So that was 32, which is awful. There's been about 12 this year because of political reasons. And we will continue to see things like this, where we have riots, protests go violent, shootings, bombings, people taking cars and slamming it into people. Yeah. But do I actually think we're going to have wholesale violence in the street where we have two armies meeting each other? I don't think so. The main reason is the business of America is business. And so I don't think big business is going to be spending any money. They're pretty smart about that. They're not going to be spending millions of dollars to fund one side or the other. The business has stayed on the sidelines of this largely and basically says, we want to conduct business. We don't want to have any part of this political battle. Oh, sorry, we have some part of the political battle, but we're doing it by proxy. We'll give you some money, but we're not going to be getting involved in mounting armies and trying to divide the country. It's not in their interest.
Yeah. So do you have any tips for somebody who they're in the part? By the way, I've had many of these conversations with friends. I keep my cool. We just have the conversation. Now, by the way, this would be a different conversation 3 to 5 years ago. I wasn't the person who kept my cool. I've done a lot of work to get to become the person I am today. But with that being said, do you have any tips of somebody? Because I've made up excuses in my head for some of the stuff you said. Right. Like, and I can't recall, but I was like, oh yeah, well, then they're going to say this. We've had deaths because of this, and that's due to this party. We had this because of this. And that's like, they'll immediately start to go on the defense. So what can somebody do internally to reset their own struggles, their own worries, their own whatever, whether it be, something as simple as meditation or whatever? What are some things they can do?
Well, we mentioned one earlier, which is to realize that if you hate half of America or you think one party is evil, you're being played for a fool. And as soon as you realize you're being a pawn on someone else's chessboard, that's kind of a motivator to go, you know what, I'm sick and tired of being a victim here. Because when you look at the polling on every issue you can possibly imagine, minimum wage, climate change, even abortionists, divisive abortions, gun rights, you poll Americans, both liberal and conservative, and there is between 70 and 90% agreement, consensus on policy.
Yeah.
So we agree on policy. The second we get into fights is we say, well, I'm a Democrat, so I agree. I want this. And as soon as we bring in the tribes into it, all of a sudden we are at odds with one another. The real important insight is to think about this. Who's winning? So when we watch a television show and that television show vilifies either another American or another group of Americans, who wins? And the answer is not your party and not them. I mean, it's kind of like taking a knife and having your right hand cut your left arm and think your right arm is now winning. I mean, it's insane. So the only people who win when you either pay money to a television show or a podcast or a radio show or an article that vilifies other Americans, or when you vilify other Americans, the only people who win are this: Russia, China, Iran, Afghanistan, North Korea. The only people who win are our rivals. The world desperately needs our leadership. There is a power vacuum at the top of the world order that's keeping peace and stability and solving problems where America used to be. But because we are spending so much time vilifying ourselves, we are not able to be on the world stage. And China is going to waltz right in. So as soon as you realize about the least patriotic thing you can do is vilifying another American or watching a show that does, it usually cuts that behavior right out.
I love that. And it's so true, because I'm watching it all from afar, kind of in it, but I'm watching it from afar and I'm going, this is just burning our country to the ground, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. We've all seen those riots before where people burn their own local stores and they burn their own neighborhoods. That is exactly what we do every single time we attack another American or watch the advertising on a show that vilifies other Americans.
Here's what I worry about. I worry about our politicians and our media continuously driving us further and further apart.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this book is a gateway to begin to fix that. But what else can we do collectively for people who go, okay, they've listened to this conversation, they've checked out your book, this all makes sense. How do we continue to spread this word and this message to be like, look, it's not me against you, it's us against
our problems,
evil, the problems. Yeah.
It's exactly it. So you've gotten independent, you've read my book, and you've shared my book with some other family member. Almost every single person here has got a family member who lives and dies by their a couple cable channels and some hate radio. And they listen to it on the way to work. They come home and they sit in front of it for a couple hours. And then they get up and do the same thing over and over again. And the only thing they can talk about is how evil either side is. And one of the first chapters in my book is called Politics is a New Religion. And by the way of the word religion, I'm not talking about a spiritual practice. What I mean by religion is way of life. And if you really look at the way politics unfurls itself on our cable news, it's more like professional wrestling. Every single day we have new heroes and new villains. There's new fighters who have been slayed. We have the seers, which are the commentators who help us understand what we're seeing. We have the pastors, which are the newscasters, basically telling us whether it was good or bad, why we're right and they're wrong. It's creating this Machiavellian landscape. Machiavellian basically means good versus evil. And if you understand the world, you realize nobody is that good and nobody is that bad. There is a whole world of gray. And so we give up this good versus evil mindset when we stop watching the news. And it happens, one person at a time, leaving this civil war and realizing how futile it is.
Yeah. I'd love to know where your thoughts are and your feelings are on where this country is actually headed. I know that you're trying to be a voice to heal us and bring us together, but are we close to a point of no return?
It's a great question, and thankfully all I have is speculation. So where it gets really, really scary are two places, and number one is violence. So our country, our government, one of the best things our government ever did was create laws so they had a monopoly on violence. So the only one who can legally commit violence in very, very narrow ways is the United States. They can do that through the military and or can do so through law enforcement. And the reason that's such a good idea is that we as human beings are incredibly vengeful. So there's a reason why they call it a cycle of violence or a cycle of vengeance. Because Justin, if you hurt me, I'm going to come back and hurt you harder. And then you hurt me harder. And before you know it, it blows. We instantly will ratchet up the violence. So any acts of violence, which we will see in the coming years, it's bubbling up beneath the surface. And I don't know what's going to happen there, but violence is not a solution. It does not help. You will not win your side. And if you look at any of the institution, any of the people who committed violence, the Taliban in 2001 did further their cause. I'm sorry, Taliban and Al-Qaeda in 2001 did it further their cause. Nope. The 1996 Oklahoma bomber did his violence to help him. Oh. The people who blew up abortion clinics back in the early 90s, did any of those causes get furthered by violence? No, it never works, ever. It makes us feel it's going to work. It does not work. So violence is the one thing that I worry about. And the second thing I worry about is elections. So if we have the only thing that's, having a free, fair, and accountable election is incredibly important. And if we continue down this path where we're voting and we don't trust the outcome of our elections, that's where things get really bad. Because ultimately, we are in this democracy because we trust our elections that the people who are in power are in power. I mean, democracy is the worst form of government except when compared to all the others.
Right. They're all terrible. I was going to say, whoa, what's better? I don't know.
Right. The only thing that's better is if I have all the power. And I mean that me. So Peter, that is the only system of that's better than democracy is I have all the power. And you're looking at me going, well, Peter, that's not better for me. Okay. Then the next best thing is no one person has all the power. We have all the power. So democracy, where we agree and believe in are free and fair elections that are accountable. If we stop believing in those, that would be the end of our country. It isn't that we don't have borders. Isn't that we don't have a court system. The capstone of our democracy is having free and fair, accountable elections that we believe in. And if we stop having that, that's when we start seeing the fall of our country.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, unfortunately, I'm seeing it more and more with every passing election. And you go back to the Declaration of Independence and what this country was founded on. Is it dated? Sure, it's dated. It was written a long, long time ago. But at the same time, the we the people, right? And when we're not being served, we must come together and do something about it. I'm paraphrasing. That's how they would have said it in 2021. But with that being said, I think you're spot on. It's terrifying, and we have to make a change. And so I do want to ask you about one more thing, which is I've noticed an uptick in division and judgment and hate and all the things when COVID became a part of this entire landscape. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories of where it came from and why it hatched and all the things, but they're certainly using it as a tool to divide us. Do you think this is just out of my own damn curiosity. Do you think they're purposely using it as a tool, or do you think that they both think that they are right with what they're saying?
Yes. So we say both. I mean, they're both our political parties, they're just political actors, there's media personalities, and they will use anything that will get them attention as a way of division. So at any time they can say the other side is crazy, the other side is wrong, the other side is trying to take something away from you, whether it be your freedom or your ability to choose or your physical safety. They're basically taking the credibility and trust that you may have had for the other organization, and they're heaping it onto themselves. So they are using fear-mongering as a way of getting more attention to either get more followers, sell more advertising, and exploit. They are exploiting the situation for their own benefit. And I will not consume any media that vilifies another American or another American group. Period. End of story.
Yeah. So where do you go for your news? Because I try my best to do the same, but I find myself, both. And again, it doesn't make me feel a certain way, because I'm sure if I stayed down that lane, I'd feel a certain way. So where do you go to find your news? That's
a great question. I don't consume any news. So I stopped consuming any news back in January, and I couldn't be happier. And so people say, well, Peter, how do you stay informed? Well, it turns out the more news you consume, and this has been shown in study after study after study, the more news you consume, the more misinformed you are. Not informed, misinformed you are. So I don't consume any news. And you also got to consider what's news. And the only thing that's news to me are things that are actually in my area of control or things that help me make better decisions. So what is news to me on a given day? The weather, sometimes the traffic. If anybody is going to attack, like if there was an invading army, or maybe there was a riot, that would be news to me because it would help me make a better decision. What else? The pandemic, what was news to me, knowing when I should wear a mask, or that was news to me. It was information that I could use. And if you take away everything that's not that is the majority of what people think is news. It's not news. I mean, it is news, but it's not really news to you. It doesn't help you change the decisions you make. So people tell me those things. They do. I mean, if it's really important, they say, hey, did you hear that Afghanistan fell and the Taliban took over? And I go, great. My whole goal is I want to be informed, not influenced. I now know that Afghanistan fell. It's as awful, by the way, horrible, horrible, horrible. But probably in a month or two, I will find a long form article on it or a long video that's been written 2 or 3 months afterwards that will actually go in depth and explain what happened. But I'll wait for the retrospective 2 or 3 months from now. So I know the headline, Afghanistan fell. There's nothing I can do about it. Really. I guess I could send some money to the American Red Cross. It'll probably be Doctors Without Borders who will probably be taking care of refugees. But beyond that, whose fault is it? I have no interest in that conversation. Yeah. I don't.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
So people who care go, well, yeah, it means I'm going to vote for this party. Great. You can know that without being frothy about it, without spending 5 hours or 10 hours in front of the TV. So the answer is I will read about it probably, or watch a documentary about it in probably 6 months and find out what was the understory. That usually will interview the inside players, the generals, the policymakers in Afghan. They'll oftentimes even interview the actual Taliban. So somebody will, and they'll post that in 6 months or maybe a year. So, or I'll read a book. But most of the stuff people call news, it's not news. I can get the weather off an app on my phone.
Yeah. The AccuWeather app's the best one, by the way. It's the most accurate. And by the way, I mean, I'm very similar. I mean, the only way you should really get the news is through memes. And so here in 2021, that's where all the real news is coming from. I've absolutely loved this conversation because I think it hopefully puts some new perspective or new eyes on this way of thinking. I've thought this way for years. And before what I consider the Great Divide, which has happened in the last year and a half, I felt this way. I'm very much, it is what it is. Like, and it's funny. I really liked how you put it. Like, I have no control over that. It doesn't it doesn't change my decisions or the things I need to do for myself. I'll be completely honest. I was a little afraid to say those types of things because it seemed selfish. It seemed like, if it doesn't affect me, then who cares? But that doesn't mean I lack empathy. That doesn't mean I don't feel like it's sad. And so, by the way, I just want to acknowledge the fact that the way you put it made it okay. I now feel okay saying that because the way you kind of opened my eyes to, okay, no, it is okay. It is okay. Like, why go down these rabbit holes? Why punish myself? Why punish my friends? Why family, whatever, instead of just being like, this is the reality of it. Yeah, it sucks, but can I do anything about it? No.
Yeah. So obviously, I think you mentioned meditation earlier. I'm a big fan of being mindful. And so this really is being mindful about this, because really I can't do anything. I'm not getting on an airplane and going over to Afghanistan and dropping out aid. I won't do that. What I probably will do, I think making a donation probably to the American Red Cross is probably at least doing something. But again, my goal is to be informed and not influenced into someone's partisan battle. I have no interest in that. It doesn't serve me or the country. And I still am informed enough that I can vote. And whether I spend an hour watching a documentary on Afghanistan, or I spend 12 hours consuming every last battle along the next couple of weeks, it's not going to change the way I vote in the next election come November or 2 years ago from November. I'll still be informed, probably better informed, because once again, people who watch news are more misinformed than they're informed.
Dude, I love that. And I want to find those studies just to send to some people that I know.
They won't believe you. They will question the source. Where'd that come from? What person wrote that? Oh, this came from that person. Well, therefore it's not true.
Yeah, no,
winning that argument.
You're 100% right. 100% right. So I like to wrap up every single one of these interviews with the same question. But before we get there, where do people go to get the book? Where can they find you online? What's all the good stuff?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that. Yeah, my book is available both on Amazon and also on Barnes & Noble. So it's the easiest places to get it. It is available in softbound, hardbound, ebook, and within a couple of weeks here, it'll be available in audiobook read by yours truly. The Second Civil War, A Citizen's Guide to Healing Our Fractured Nation. It is really easy to read, and it's by Peter Montoya. There's a couple of books also with the title, The Second Civil War, but it's the one by me, Peter Montoya. Thank you for asking that. And they can go to my website, which is petermontoya.com, petermontoya.com.
Awesome. And we'll link all that stuff up in the show notes so you guys can just click away and do whatever you need to do. But Peter, this conversation's been phenomenal. Like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. And it's intriguing because a lot of my conversations are about people's lives. We talk about their journey through life and how they got to where they are. And you shared just a snapshot of that. But I saw massive growth in that moment for you with your stepfather or for your father-in-law. Sorry. Now, this might not be your answer, but my final question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
It is better to learn from a failure than to have a massive success. So I have had monumental failures in my life. And the reoccurring lesson with every single one of those failures is humility. So 24 years ago, when I started my first business, I was self-righteous, I was arrogant, and I was defensive. And I never told anybody what I was thinking about doing. And I shouted out orders at my team and told them what to do. And when anyone dissented, I quieted them. Then I got to a place where I said, okay, that was dumb. I got to get more input. Hey, anybody, you can give me input whenever you might need it. And I just left the invitation open. And then I had a failure, another business failure. And one of my team came up to me afterwards and said, Peter, your idea was never going to work. It was because X, Y, and Z. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this earlier? I would have saved 6 months. And so now I realized, even though your team members have permission to tell you, that's not enough. So on a regular basis in my team meetings, I will ask questions that sound like the following. If we fail, why? What's the weakness in this idea? What are we missing here? How am I, me, Peter, sabotaging your success right now? I ask questions like that. And when they give me the answer, I listen.
Yeah.
I listen. So that lesson from my failures and not only saying I'm open to feedback, but soliciting it by asking hard questions is the most important lesson I've ever learned.
I love it, man. That's key. And just because of that answer, I feel like you're going to be back on the show in the future, and we'll talk business and we'll dive into all that stuff, man. But Peter, thank you so much for not just coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, but for writing this insanely important book right now. The acknowledgement of, guess what? We are in a civil war again. And we need, as the people of this country, we need to come together and make this work. Guys, go get this book. Let's begin to heal this country and do all this stuff, man. Peter, thank you so much.
Oh, Justin, you are such an awesome host, man. There's a reason why your show is as popular as it is, because you're really good at this. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.